On today's show, my biggest guest as Locked On Clippers host thus far, the voice of your LA Clippers, Brian Sieman, joining us on Locked On Clippers. Gonna be hearing from the man himself on today's Locked On Offseason Clippers.
You are Locked On Clippers, your daily Los Angeles Clippers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, sir. You are locking in with the Clips. Thank you for making Locked On Clippers the first listen of your day, your team every day. I'm your host, Darian Vaziri, born and raised in LA and entering my 20th season as a Clipper fan this fall. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DimeDropperPod and subscribe to my own YouTube channel, Dime Dropper, for even more LA Clipper content. And Locked On Clippers, free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Let me know what you think in the comments below, because today we have definitely the most special guest of my tenure as Locked On Clippers host. He is the CEO of Hot Damn Inc., the coffee pun king, the voice of your LA Clippers, and one of the great play-by-play guys in the league today, Brian Sieman, joining us right here on Locked On Clippers. Brian, this is a pleasure. I was listening to you at 9:80 a.m. as a kid, so this is amazing for me.
That's great. You know, I know we met, I think it was March, maybe 18 months ago, when they were having like an unveiling for Intuit Dome. It's great to do this podcast. I will be honest, I don't get to listen to all of the podcasts that get put out by Clipper people, and there are a lot of good ones. I mean, when I say I don't listen to all of them, I mean literally every episode, but I've listened to all of them. And I admire the work you do every day, coming up with like new things to talk about. I could feel your frustration, you know, after we had lost to Dallas and what the future held. So I think you're a great voice for the fans, and I'm very honored to be here.
Oh, that means so much coming from you. And I just want to, let's start out with, how's your summer been? What's the summer like as a play-by-play broadcaster in the NBA, where during the season you're constantly traveling?
The travel it can be tough. The hard part about travel is the 3 a.m. arrivals. After that, everything is pretty awesome. I'm not going to make any excuses or anything like that. It's pretty great. But getting in at 3 a.m. and I have kids that I like to, drive to school just so we can have some time in the morning. So I'm up at 6:37 when that happens. I drive them to school. So the travel isn't that bad. Trust me, we're flying charter. We stay in very nice hotels, and we're very, very well taken care of. But the off season for me does involve a little bit of rest at first to kind of just get back to being at home. You wind down in weird ways. It used to take me a few weeks just to kind of stop thinking, okay, I've got a game to get ready for. I got to get these notes. I got to read this article. And you go from like 100 to 0 in the blink of an eye, and it can be very difficult. My wife is a saint for putting up. I can be very grouchy because I just love what I do. I miss doing it. But the month after the season ends is probably the best, just in terms of relaxing. And then, June, July, August hit. I'm pretty much a homebody. I'm not a guy that's going out and spending late nights anywhere. We go for family vacations. It's really the most deliberately boring life you could live. But as far as the NBA goes, I love watching Summer League. I love the free agent frenzy. As far as just being a play-by-play guy specifically, I do go back and I watch games, and I watch them with a critical ear, out of order, out of context. I would love to think that every fan is watching every single minute of every game until we sign off, but I know that's not the case, and you get a lot of fans that parachute in. So in the summer, I try to have their viewpoint, where I just, what happened in Detroit in February? And I'm trying to think, okay, as I watch it, did I give you everything you needed to know? If you hadn't been watching the Clippers over the last 2 weeks, do you feel like you have an idea of what's going on? Are there too many inside jokes? Is there not enough explanation about stats that we've been tracking? But overall, it's a pretty low stress life in the summer, and I like it that way.
So when do you reach the point where you're like, I'm ready to just go back? I miss it.
June, that month, once I recalibrate, I get back into it, I've kind of gotten my rest back, and I'm just excited to watch. When I watch those games back, it can be very frustrating because there's many times where I feel like, boy, that was just a terrible game. That was awful. And when that happens during the regular season, and I watch them after the games are over during the regular season, I know I got a game tomorrow, or I got a game in 2 days. Now I don't have a game for 4 or 5 months. And so I just have to sit with this self anger that I get, disappointment and whatnot. But it's all good. It's all part of the process.
Yeah, it's interesting for me adjusting to adult life. Growing up, you look forward to the summers, you cherish the summers, and you dread the calendar, like the school year. And it's kind of weird now where my life is almost, I don't know about better, but it's more happening. Like my life is really in overdrive when the season's going on and I'm working around the basketball season. But it's honestly better because if you're looking forward to what's the longer part of the year, I think that's better than only looking forward to 3 months as a kid. So I think we're winning in that respect. But let me ask you this. You talk about the end of the season, and I remember a very specific, kind of like your closing monologue as the clock was winding down in Dallas. And it was that moment where you were just kind of addressing Clipper Nation, and I could feel the pain in your voice that it was so relatable for all of us. What does it feel like, as a guy who's been around this team? What was your first season with the team again?
Matter of fact, yesterday was my 17-year anniversary. This will be year 18. I signed my contract September 3rd, 2007. So to get you back there, that's Elton Brand is still with the team. Sean Livingston is rehabbing. Corey Maggette is still putting up 20 and grabbing 8 rebounds and getting the free throw line. So that's how far back. Mike Dunleavy was the coach. If we need to really start getting people into that mindset of how long ago this was.
No, if you want to start getting people back in that mindset and getting really Clipper nerdy, that's the season. We started out 4-0. We had the same.
You are excellent. That is excellent work out of you. 10 out of 10. Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm telling everybody we're going to the playoffs. I'm like, oh, we got this. We got this. And I'm like, nope, you don't. Yeah, I think we won 19 more times after that. Excellent job out of you.
Literally. And that was when we had the graphics up. Oh, wait, Celtics 4-0. 4-0. It's like, yeah, they two teams ended with totally different endings to the season. But how does it feel though, talking to the fans about that pain? Because I know you obviously are feeling it as well, dreaming of what the season could have been. What's it like? It's year after year from your perspective.
I'll be very honest. It's truly one of the more, and I don't look for a pat on the back on this, one of the truly more selfless things. Like I root for my kids and I want them to have success. And when they have success, I'm just happy for them. When it comes to the Clippers, I'm upset for the fans. I'm upset for the front office, who I know has done an incredible job since Lawrence Frank took over. I'm upset for Steve Ballmer, who is doing there. I don't know what else you could ask an owner to do, especially going into the year that we're about to have with our own brand new arena. I just think of the fans who, we were all there. Look, if you didn't think the Clippers realistically had a chance to win a title in January and February when they had the best record, they were rolling, and it just looked like this was a done deal that they could get to the conference finals, get to the finals. I felt it. There were a few fans that were like, I don't want to believe it because I know something can happen. And unfortunately, that did happen. Me. Yeah, right. And I don't blame you. We all protect our feelings. I get fired up, and when I'm fired up, I truly mean it. It's for the fans. They've put in so much time. There's such a resilient bunch. And I just love being a small part of this community. So when we do great, I just can't wait to get back to a home game to see everybody and how they're feeling. And, I used to sit in section 111 and there were a lot of people that I would recognize. And I'm like, what's the temperature? How are we doing? This is good. And I remember that run. People were like, I just don't believe it. It's unbelievable. We're so good. I didn't think Harden was going to be great. And he's turned out to be even better. And when Kawhi, it was interesting because when we got into Sacramento from Charlotte, which was the last game that Kawhi played, they just said Kawhi had some knee inflammation. There was no event, right? So I just thought, okay, this is a couple of weeks. We got plenty of time. And then I just started feeling like it wasn't going to happen and that I hadn't seen him working out. And I'm like, man, he's going to go from 0 to 100 and being in the playoffs against a team that could possibly get to the finals. I did believe that about Dallas. So it's a roller coaster of emotions that I feel for the fans and then maybe when after all that dust settles, I'm bummed out as well personally because I just love the team. I love watching them.
Yeah, this was a very big season for the Clippers in many ways. Obviously trading for James Harden, but also being the last year at Crypto.com Arena or Staples Center. How was the year for you overall? Just with the 26-5 stretch, how well we were doing, but also just your last year in a building that you've called home for so many years.
Well, I am debilitatingly sentimental. I mean, like to a
Same.
yeah, it sucks. I mean, it is brutal. I mean, I can't go anywhere without being like, oh, and having, some good vibes, a lot of good vibes, and then some sad ones. I called before I was ever a Clipper. I called my first game at Staples Center, which it will always be Staples Center to me. March 7th, 2003. I was working for the Timberwolves. And there's not a time when I walked into that building that I didn't think of that specific day. And then my parents came to visit me in 2007 when I first started. My son was weeks old when he came to his first game. He's now 16. He's a sophomore in high school.
Wow.
So I've had so many great family moments, personal moments, professional moments in that building. I'm glad it's not like antiquated and getting phased out. We'll still be able to go there 2 times a year, if not more, if we play them in the playoffs or whatever. But I'm glad I'll still be able to see it. My wife had just asked me that question, as a matter of fact, because she knows how I am. So it's going to be great to go back and visit. And it's a weird thing too, when you think about leaving. I don't know if you've ever moved from your parents' place and you get your own place. You're sad to leave, but you're happy to go to the new places, which is what we're going to do at Intuit Dome. So it's really. We'll talk about Intuit Dome, I'm sure, a little bit later. And I'm not even sure I remember your initial question. I got so sidetracked about becoming sentimental.
You answered it. But if you want to expand on, how it was feeling when we were 26-5, and James Harden was rolling, that moment, obviously, as you said, there were a lot of fans protecting their feelings. But as far as, your tenure as a Clipper play-by-play man, was that what you think was the best stretch of ball that you witnessed as the guy? Coming up next, Brian gives us his thoughts on the past season and whether or not it was the best stretch in Clipper history. I got to tell you a little something about FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket. That's right. NFL Sunday Ticket free trial as the season is upon us this upcoming weekend. My Rams are in action against the Detroit Lions, but you can bet on any game, not necessarily the Rams or the Chargers, on FanDuel. The line for the opening game is -3 for Kansas City. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sports book.
So I try to be very measured when I hand out compliments. Like, I don't want to, sometimes a play happens and I go crazy and it's just a dunk, whatever, but I'm excited. Those are true emotions. But when I have a comment, I think we were in New Orleans, and we start pulling away for them late. And I don't know what our record was at that time. We had gotten in late the night before. We had just drubbed Phoenix in Phoenix. And again, I don't remember what our mark was, but it had been almost 2 months that we had been playing at a high level. And I did say, in my time here since 2007, this is the best I've ever seen this organization play. And that includes a 17-game winning streak in, I think it was December of 2012, going into the 13 season. We had some great stretches in 2019, and we saw them get to the conference finals in 2021. That stretch that we saw, and it bled into the All-Star break. And then after that, I think everybody ran out of gas. But that stretch was absolutely the best stretch that I've seen us play. Everybody was clicking, and you've got to give credit to everyone, literally everybody, from the coaching staff and the front office for rolling the dice on James Harden. I would have not done it. I didn't know if it was going to work. I cringed when he called himself the system. And I thought, what are we doing here? Like, this is the exact thing we don't want. And as it turns out, he is the system. He is terrific and amazing. And it was a joy to watch him play. I just was like really pleased for all the people that really went out on a limb to make that happen. Kawhi and PG were rolling. I mean, it was just awesome. Terrence had a slow start, but just kept at it. And I tell you, man, it was a fun stretch. And I really thought, man, we're going to close out Staples and head into Intuit Dome. And night one is going to be a ring ceremony. I even got so far to ask, I'm like, look, when is when is that like kind of like courtyard going to be done at Intuit Dome? Like I thought, like, is there a possibility that if this thing goes where we can go, that you could have a ceremony there? And they were like, we're already ahead of it. We know what's going on. Yes, we can figure something out. You know what I mean? But nobody was overconfident. I want to be very clear about that. But that's where my mind was at. That's how good I thought that team was.
Yeah, I don't know if I debated about it with Adam. Adam was on our radio host that you were just on his show, and I was just on his show, and he joined us a week ago or so. But he was saying that he thought that was the best stretch of Clipper basketball ever, and I would have to agree. Even though Lob City had so many incredibly fun moments, there was a level as a Clipper fan that I'd never felt in that stretch where I was like, it's gonna take a lot for us to even lose one game right now. And I've never felt that way because it legitimately felt like we had 3 stars for the first time. And with all due respect to one of the greatest Clippers of all time, DeAndre Jordan, it's just a slightly different level with James Harden. He really was dictating games. I want to segue a little bit into your history as a broadcaster because I'm very nerdy about this the play-by-play stuff and the color commentary stuff and the history of the game. Like if you were to ask me all the play-by-play guys in the NBA locally right now off the top of my head, I think I could list all 30 of them. And let me know, when did you know that you wanted to be a play-by-play guy in the NBA? And were there any play-by-play guys that inspired you and you looked up to as a kid, or was it just kind of off your own interest that you wanted to do it?
I think that's a good question. I knew I wanted to go into sports broadcasting at a very young age, 2nd grade. And then, but I wanted to be like an anchor because I thought that was cool back in those days when I grew up. I mean, being an anchor, it was I'm not old like Ron Burgundy, but like you get what I'm talking about. Like anchor, man. Like, I mean, oh my gosh, if you saw your local anchor at a grocery store, it was like literally seeing the Mona Lisa to me. But then I saw Magic Johnson play basketball, and I played basketball. My parents had put me into sports. This is at a very young age just to see what stuck. And I kind of liked it. I was like, okay, that's fine. But I saw Magic play, and I was a tall kid, so I always played center, but I didn't want to play center. I didn't like center. I wanted to handle the ball. I wanted to shoot. And when I saw Magic, a 6'9" point guard, like literally, I mean, everything in my body changed and my mindset changed. I just wanted to know everything about the NBA. It was kind of coming out of a dark time in the early 80s at that point in time. And David Stern had just taken over, and they were really starting to generate interest. Jordan is drafted, so there's a ton of like media hype, as much as there could be in the mid 80s. And that's when I thought, okay, what do I need to do to become a guy that just talks about NBA basketball? And so I would watch the games, and I'm like, this is what I want to do. I'd watch the games on CBS, and Dick Stockton was a guy that I liked. You hear his voice, and it's a big game. But as you went on, like I really wanted to be on radio for a long time. I loved it, the creativity of it all. But I mean, I was influenced by literally dozens and dozens of people. I would say that. So I went to the University of Kansas, and it's late 90s. And I tell my roommate, hey, this class that I was taking was called Sports Broadcasting 685. And I said, hey, we're having a guest speaker today. Do you know who Kevin Harlan is? And my roommate goes berserk. He's like, oh my God, the voice of the Chiefs. He's unbelievable. You're going to love him. You're going to go crazy. So it was a small, intimate setting. And I had not heard Kevin Harlan. He had just literally been hired by TBS to call like the 3rd or 4th game in the playoffs. And he came in and spoke, and we had the same professor. Now, I had a lot more to learn than Kevin did. And he came in and spoke. Absolute gentleman, absolute stud. And I watched him for the next few summers. He did NFL Europe. That's where he kind of started on Fox. And then he's built himself up to be, I mean, you could flip a 3-sided coin between Kevin Harlan, Mike Breen, and Ian Eagle, who are the best 3 basketball play-by-play guys out there right now. But Kevin Harlan is a guy that has directly and indirectly influenced me, but so has so many others. But Harlan, because I went to Kansas, and then ultimately just a few years later, after I graduated, I went to the Minnesota Timberwolves, and he had just called his last game for the Wolves. So I took over in a different role than when he left, and I got to listen to all of his games. They had all of their games in a giant room in order, season by season. And I said, can I take these and listen to them? And they said, absolutely. So I would take those home and study them like I was studying for an exam. That's how much he was an influence to me. But you move on. You can't be influenced by one. You have to be. It's called my professor. His name was Tom Hedrick, who taught both Kevin Harlan and myself. Again, Kevin more to learn or less to learn than I did. He said, if you steal from one, it's plagiarism. If you do it from a lot, it's called research. So I definitely researched a lot. What did I like, dislike? You can listen to somebody. If you're an upcoming broadcaster and you want to do this, you can listen to anyone and learn something, whether it's the way to do it or the way not to do it. And certainly with Kevin Harlan, I learned the way to do it on many different levels.
You mentioned Dick Stockton. Did you have any favorite as a kid?
No, well, I grew up, so this is before League Pass. So you only had network announcers. So Al Michaels was a guy that I loved, still do. He'd be on my Mount Rushmore. Bob Costas is a guy that would be on my Mount Rushmore as well. Costas was a guy that I just appreciated his wit and humor. You're too young to remember when NBC took over. This is in 1990, not now.
Yeah.
1990, NBC took over the NBA rights, and they were fantastic with Marv and my guy, Mike Fratello. And Bob Costas was the studio host alongside Pat Riley. And there was so much chemistry between those two guys. But Costas, you knew that he was a very cerebral person, but he would have these like one-liners, just one-off little jokes. And I'm like, you can be funny. Oh, okay. And then you start thinking about it. So back in those days, you're influenced by the network announcers. But today I'm influenced by, you say you could mention all of your, all the local guys. I mean, I could mention them obviously too. They still inspire me. I listen to everybody every time I can. And I'm like, man, those guys, that's a great show. Good for them.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier in the show when you were talking about your own work, like, do I feel as though the people that haven't tuned into a game in 2 weeks are up to speed? And that's one thing I love about listening on League Pass to the local broadcast is there's nobody that's more in tune with the team than you guys, the local broadcast team that watches every game. Because when you listen to a national, you know, and we have some incredible national guys in the NBA, but it's more like you hear a lot of what you hear from fans. You know, they're watching some games, you know, they're doing some research before the game, but it's not the same as, you know, putting on a Mavs game and listening to Mark Followell and Derek Harper and hearing everything that's happened with Dallas recently. So I love, you know, tapping into those things. It's interesting that you mentioned Magic Johnson because I don't get to talk about him too much being that this is a Clippers show, but, you know, I grew up in a way that I was a shorter kid, but I wanted to handle the ball too because that's a point guard's job. And so Dime Dropper is my podcast name because I love, you know, the assist. That was my thing. And whenever I go back and watch games, legitimately Magic, when I watch him play, it feels like everything I love about basketball in one player. I mean, he truly is. Even after watching the modern game and stuff like that, I truly, like, he's one of one, truly. Like, I've never seen anything like it. I wanted to ask about, because you grew up in Iowa, so when you talk about local listings and stuff like that, what were the games that you were watching back then?
So it was really cool. The first ever basketball game that I watched was coached by a guy named George Raveling. And George is an iconic figure on a lot of levels in our world. He actually worked for the Clippers for a time and may still be kind of a consultant for us. But he had a great team at the University of Iowa. And the way it worked out was really cool for me. I'd watch the games, and once I started to realize that basketball was my thing, and those were back in the days where college basketball and the NBA, to me, like, they were 1-1. Like, I loved them both. The storylines that you would get out of college with 4-year seniors, none of this leaving after the freshman year. And I get it. I'm not arguing or complaining about it. It's just I wish it was back in those days. But back to George Raveling and the Hawkeyes. I grew up watching them, and the voice of the Iowa Hawkeyes at the time was a guy named Larry Morgan. And Larry was and is still with us, 6-time award winner, best broadcaster in Iowa. And he's a mentor and a personal friend of mine. So when I'm 7, 8 years old, I'm watching this guy. And now here we are so many years later that we're friends. That when he comes into town, he's got family here. We go out to dinner. When I go back to Des Moines, we go out to lunch. It's really worked out well. But that's who I would watch and learn a lot. Iowa. So Iowa was kind of the king in the state, University of Iowa. And they had a goofy Harry Carey-like announcer on radio named Jim Zabel, and he didn't really cover the game so much as he was a character, and people enjoyed it. People enjoyed it. I enjoyed it, and it was one of those things where it turns a light on for you, like, oh, you can be a little goofy, you can have fun, you can exaggerate something as long as everyone knows you're exaggerating it for effect and all that kind of stuff. So you learn incrementally, and then when I got into the minor leagues, what would happen was I would take, it was a bus league, and I would take a transistor radio with me, like a little Walkman, and we would drive at night, and I would just scroll through every dial there was, every little radio station, and I would hear people calling Division 3 whatever, and I would listen to them. Hey, how do they bring it in and out of break? Okay, well, that's not great. And then sometimes you'd pick up like the Pittsburgh Penguins. You'd be in South Dakota, and the radio waves would just work. You'd get an NHL game on there, and you'd figure, oh man, these guys sound like pros. Listen to these guys. This is why they're in the major leagues. And so you can find something from anywhere. And I had always tried to find as much as I could with that radio, because again, no league pass, nothing like that back in those days. And we're all spoiled now.
We're talking, when you're talking this, you're talking pre-college, right?
Both. Yeah. It was, well, the driving around in the minor leagues was post-college, but
Okay.
like with watching George Raveling and the Iowa Hawkeyes, that's when I first started to kind of figure out kind of the blueprint on how to call a game. And then ultimately I would go on in high school, be the sports director, and call games for my high school radio station.
I didn't have it written on my agenda, but since you brought up Iowa Hawkeyes and college and stuff, I might ask, like, how do you feel about the whole Caitlin Clark phenomenon thing?
Love it. And I'll tell you, I never got a chance to watch her until the NCAA tournament. We were always having conflicts, and quite honestly, if I'm going to watch a basketball game, it's going to be an NBA game. It's just for my job. It helps me do it better.
Right.
We had a couple of nights off this year, and I could not get over. All I saw were the highlights, of her taking deep threes, and I thought, okay, she's Trae Young. Not all that interested. She is not Trae Young. She is super substance and really great, and I'm just a huge fan. I did work in the WNBA for many years, so I'm rooting for that league, and I get how some of the players are feeling, but they need to understand. It reminds me, and I don't want to compare the two directly, but when Tiger Woods came into the PGA Tour, he took it by storm, both from a media standpoint, and then ultimately his play did all the talking for him. I feel the same way about Caitlin Clark and the WNBA. And I'm a big golf fan, so I followed Tiger for every tournament. Players on the PGA Tour back in 1996, 97, they were like, oh, this little guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He thinks he's going to win every week. He's going to have a real humbling experience. Fast forward to 2024, the same exact words have been spoken about Caitlin Clark, and she's having the last laugh. At the end of the day, I'm rooting for the WNBA, and I think all those players will understand, okay, she's gone through the rookie year. This is not a fluke. She's legit, and I think everybody will embrace. They'll certainly enjoy it when that new TV contract kicks in, because it's going to be a very good one for the league.
Coming up, Brian talks about his start in broadcasting and joining the Minnesota Timberwolves before he joined the LA Clippers. Check it out next. Yeah, let's talk about the start you had with the pros. I don't know. I don't think many Clipper fans are quite aware of your history with the Timberwolves. So, I mean, how was it? Was that your first job with the NBA, is working for the Wolves? And describe that and how it was like working with the team that had prime Kevin Garnett.
It did. It had prime Kevin Garnett. So I started there in 2002, and I was hired as the voice of the Lynx, the Minnesota Lynx. Back in those days, the NBA owned all the WNBA teams, which was one of the great reasons why, as a broadcaster, you would want to get into the WNBA. I'll be honest, the first, like when I got the job, in my mind, I'm like, okay, this is a stepping stone. I'm just trying to get into the NBA. Within 2 days of going to practice and talking to the players, I was head over heels in love with the league and hearing their backstories and all the stuff that they have to go through. So this is in 2002. Like, these are part-time jobs that they just kind of mishmash together to create a career financially. They're going over to Russia, they're going overseas, all that kind of stuff. So I just loved it. My first year ends, and they said, hey, we'd love to have you come back next year. I was like, great. It was one of the great experiences of my life, but I was dating my wife, but we were dating at the time. So I would go back to Denver and live in Denver, work odd jobs. I worked at a radio station. I played poker for a year. I was a bartender. I did all these sinning jobs. I didn't even tell my parents. They were very religious at the time. I didn't want to tell them what I was doing. But the big day was the biggest break I ever got was in March of 2003. My boss called me. I was still in Denver, and he said, "Hey, we have an opening. We need you to be in Los Angeles on Friday. Can you fill in and call your first game? It's Clippers. It's Timberwolves Lakers Friday night at Staples Center." And I lost my mind. I literally could not believe it. I know what it would feel like to win $1 billion. I would rather have that phone call. And that week prepping, the game was amazing. I felt like I was the best I could be at that time. I felt like I nailed it, and I had an NBA tape. And that's what you need to apply to an NBA job. So in 2003, I felt like, in my mind, when I graduated college, I was young. I think I was 21. I thought, okay, give yourself 9 years. And if you're not in a position to get an NBA job, maybe start looking for something else. And that I didn't have to be in the NBA. I just had to think I could get there. Well, I think it was 3 or 4 years out of college, I got that tape, and I cannot tell you, that is a day. So when you tell me about Staples Center, I think of that. That's right there where my mind goes. That's how exciting it was for me, and that's how much Staples means to me in that day, March 7th. It was a Friday. I'll never forget it.
So then you were with the Wolves for a couple of years after that?
I was with the Wolves as a backup guy. This is a crazy story. It was a backup guy. I appreciated it all. I just appreciated all what they did for me. They would give me TV sideline stuff. Whenever their guys got sick, I'd fill in. Well, the job came open full time in 2006. I ended up getting it. I got lucky to get it. The year before, I had interviewed with the Clippers. I didn't get it. They hired a very good announcer named Matt Pinto. You probably remember. Matt's terrific. He's now with Oklahoma City. They made the right choice. When I found out it was he and I was like, oh, I would never had a chance. But Matt ended up leaving for Seattle when the Sonics had an opening. And it's funny. So in 2007, my wife and I are shopping for homes in Minnesota. We put a full offer down. We give asking price. We put it down. I fly to, we were on the road. We go to a game for the WNBA, and I get a call from my real estate agent. He says, "Hey, you didn't get it. You got outbid. I'm sorry." I was crestfallen. I'm devastated. 2 minutes later, the Clippers called and said, "Hey, what's your contract situation with the Wolves?" Well, the Wolves only gave me a 1-year deal. And I said, "Oh, it's up in a couple of weeks." But I'm still thinking about the house. We're negotiating with the Wolves, and the Clippers say, "So you don't have a contract? Hold on." And the team president gets on the phone. He says, "Brian, it's been 2 years. Remember when I told you after we didn't give you the job that you're going to be a Clipper before your career is over? Well, today is that day. We want you to be the next voice of the Clippers and be here for the rest of your career. What do you say?" And if I had gotten that house, I would have said no. And it would have been awful, to be honest. It would have been absolutely awful. I would have missed out on so many great relationships here and just opportunities. And I've always loved LA from afar. So it's just crazy how some things can work out.
Hope you enjoyed part 1 with Clipper play-by-play man Brian Sieman. Part 2 will be out tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you guys enjoyed this one or are enjoying this one. Let me know in the comment section below. And also, got Brian on. Can we get to 6,000 subscribers before the season? It would really mean a lot to me if we did. 6,000 subs. We're almost there. Make sure you hit the notification bell so you know every single time we post a video. This is special. We're doing big things. I've been trying to get more guests for you guys this offseason, and I think I have. Get me to 6K. Get us to 6K. Show everybody that Clipper Nation is for real.